So, hello, this is Professor Daryl Fisher. This is our first class, chapter 19. We're starting with blood. And my expectation is that before you watch the videos, you read the chapter. Now, I know some people may want to just watch the videos and not read the chapters at all, but I recommend reading the chapters first and then let us watch the video and I can add to what you may have already learned and then also enhance and maybe explain things that maybe you had questions with during the videos. If you don't have the book, I recommend getting the book if you're serious about these topics and learning these topics. These are topics that if you decide to go into a medical profession, you will need to know. If you're watching this on your cell phone, you may have a little bit of difficulty. Trying to do this whole class from like a cell phone is challenging. If that's the case, let me know. You can send me an email or something like that, and I so I can understand your situation. If at all possible, you're probably going to want to use a computer, laptop, or tablet, a bigger screen, so that you can see me, see the screen, see the slides, and everything. But the slides that you see here are a little bit different. So you'll see in the course files, you'll see I, that the slides, the unedited version of the slides are 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 there, but you also have an edited version, which is the version that it says Professor Fisher. I think it's Professor Fisher adjusted slides or something like that. You'll see it says Professor Fisher on the folder. It's my version of the PowerPoint slides. So I sort of highlight the things that I really want you to focus on and pay attention to. So just know that you have the original version and you have the Professor Fisher edited version, which is the version uh, that you'll see me use during these presentations, during these lectures. All right. And so I tried to like cut a few slides out. I tried to highlight some of the important points and to better help you understand it. But if you just want to look at all the information, especially if you don't have the book, then you can see both sets of slides. So you can see the things you can see everything as the way the book presents it. All right. So we're starting with an overview of the blood. Everybody knows that you have blood, it flows through your body. It's very important, sustaining sustaining life. And so this chapter is about blood as we go into the cardiovascular circulatory system. We'll talk about the heart, the arteries, the veins, the capillaries, the venules, the red blood cells. We're going to eventually spend a couple chapters on this whole topic, but mind you that the the general idea, and I like to always kind of start with like the overview, the big picture. The big picture is that we know blood flows through our bodies, and so we know that blood is in a what we call it's in a circulatory system. It's circulating throughout our bodies. We'll talk about that in more detail, but the general idea is that we want to bring oxygen to our cells, tissues, different parts of the body, remove carbon dioxide. So we'll talk about that process. We also want to bring nutrients to our cells and tissues and organs and remove waste. So all of this happens through your blood. Now the blood obviously doesn't move by itself. It's pumped by the heart. Everybody knows the heart, uh, about the size of a fist, uh, pumping always while you're alive. Everybody knows if your heart stops beating, that would be very problematic for you. Uh, there's hopefully you've all been certified in cardiopulmonary resuscitation, CPR. That's the process of getting someone their heart beating and breathing again, because if you're not breathing, if your heart's not beating, you're not getting oxygen to your body parts, things start to die. You can live without food for days. You can live without water, I think, for a couple hours. I think up to, I think it's like 48 hours. I don't know. I forget the exact number. We'll talk about that when we get to that point. But you cannot live without oxygen very long. If you are deprived of oxygen, which I know now I'm talking about the respiratory system, but that oxygen comes in through our respiratory system. We breathe it in the mouth, goes down the different structures, eventually gets to our lungs, our alveoli, and is transferred to our bloodstream. And then our bloodstream helps transfer that oxygen to the different parts of our bodies. So that's why the heart and the lungs work closely together, as you're going to see in that process. But we cannot last long without oxygen. And so that's why CPR is something that's very important. You'll see that if you go into a medical profession, even myself as a personal trainer, to maintain my certification, I have to renew my CPR. I have to get my CPR certificate, or whatever it is, whatever it's called, renewed every 2 years. And my wife is a nurse at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and she also has to maintain her CPR credentials. And if you find yourself working pretty much in any profession with children, if you go in that direction, you're going to need it. There's infant CPR. So it's very important. If you have children, I would recommend you getting it, because then you don't know. I've had to help my own child who stopped breathing at one point because he was choking on a plum tomato. And so it really wasn't CPR per se, but I did have to uh, help relieve the item that was clogging his airway and make sure that he was breathing again, because it was a tough situation at the time. So blood is very important. If you ever watch the news, you'll see, unfortunately, in Philadelphia, people get shot, and one of the reasons bullets kill you, one of the reasons, I'm sure everybody knows, but one of the reasons is you can bleed out. If you lose too much blood due to a bullet puncturing part of your body, you lose too much blood, um, unfortunately, you won't live, because that if if the blood is not in your body, it's not able to transfer oxygen and nutrients to different parts of your body, and therefore, and there's also other issues as well that can occur due to bleeding out, but that can also cause you to quickly perish. All right. So without further ado, let's continue with blood. All right. So we have about 5 liters of blood. It's a blood is considered a connective tissue. All right. So remember, we talked about these in Bio 109: cells, tissues, organs, organ systems. Right. So blood is considered a tissue. Considered tissue. What is a tissue? A group of cells, so different types of cells working together for a specific function. Makes up 8% of your total body weight. So if you weighed 200 pounds, which I'm about 185, but if you weighed 200 pounds, that would mean that 16 pounds of your body weight would be blood, right? 16 pounds if you weighed 200 pounds. So 8% of your total body weight. And we know that blood circulates through the what we call blood vessels at all times, right? Arteries, veins, arterioles, venules, capillaries. We're going to learn about all of these. And here we have in this picture here, we're going to talk about the different layers of blood, the 3 visible layers of blood. But you see if you look at it microscopically, you can see the different types of blood cells, the white blood cells, the red blood cells, platelets. All right, so all these are going to play an important role. Right, so blood is made up of plasma, right? One or two major components of blood, which is this is the liquid extracellular matrix of blood. So remember when we talk about a tissue, we talk about not only that tissue being the cells, the different cell types, but also a tissue has an extracellular matrix, right? Matrix that helps bind things or hold things or somehow works together with those different cell types. That's what makes it a tissue. And we also have this, what we call formed elements, cells and cell fragments found suspended in the plasma, right? So this, we're further separating this, this sample of blood. As you can see in this first test tube, you see what we normally would look at when we see blood. But if you know blood, because it has different cells, different parts to it, it can be separated out. If you put it in a centrifuge, it will separate out into plasma, which is what we talked about here, one of the major components of blood. It's a liquid extracellular matrix. And you see in the plasma, we have water, plasma proteins, small solutes. Then we have this, what we call buffy coat, which we'll talk about more, where we have platelets. Remember, platelets or what's platelets help us with blood clotting. Um, the water, the plasma proteins, and the small solutes of in the plasma are they play a role. Obviously, water plays a huge role. This is we're gonna show you one of the reasons why it's important to drink water. If you've ever donated blood, you'll notice that they'll tell you to drink water. They usually tell you to drink water beforehand. If you're dehydrated when it comes time to donate blood, your blood will flow slower, right? So we'll talk about why that is, but water plays a significant role in the concentration of your blood. So if you have enough water in your body, your blood actually flows better. I'll address that more later. And then we have erythrocytes, which are that's what we know as red blood cells. Okay, so these three different parts of blood. Three different types of formed elements make up blood. Erythrocytes, your red blood cells, that's what's going to carry your oxygen. Those erythrocytes have hemoglobin, which binds oxygen. Leukocytes, your white blood cells, that's those are going to be especially important for fighting off diseases like COVID-19. And then you have platelets. That's another type of formed element, which are cellular fragments. And this is going to be important for our response when there's an injury. Right, these three distinct layers of form blood sample is centrifuged, right? And like you saw on the diagram before, 55% is plasma. That middle layer, that buffy coat, makes up 1%. And then you have this bottom layer, which is your erythrocytes. That is 44%. And if you ever heard of hematocrit, that's like trying to figure out how much, how many red, how much of your blood is red blood cells. That's something that people have test. Certain people have to have tested, or they'll test, especially if you have some type of illness. My wife actually has sickle cell anemia, so she has to definitely get hematocrits where they can figure out the percentage, the amount of erythrocytes in her blood, the healthy erythrocytes. Right? What are the functions of blood? Like, and I've mentioned some of these already, but I want to make sure to sort of highlight these. And this hopefully excites you for learning more about these next couple chapters when we get into circulatory cardiovascular system, right? We have exchange of gases. I've already talked about that. You breathe in oxygen, right? Everybody knows that. You breathe out carbon dioxide. That's not just your lungs. It's not just your mouth. It's not just your trachea. That has a lot to do with the blood, which is transferring oxygen to the cells and removing the carbon dioxide from the cells, and eventually working with the respiratory system to allow you to, breathe in and breathe out. Distributing solutes, we're going to talk about things like hormones can travel through your bloodstream to be able to go and work in different parts of your body. They perform immune functions. I already talked about white blood cells, and they work for our immune response, which we're going to get into a lot of detail. Blood helps maintain your body temperature, right? So if if I get if I get too hot, if my skin, if I was a little lighter, you would notice this, especially if I was a Caucasian. If I got too hot, I'd get what they call flush. I get red, in the sense that there's blood going to the surface of my skin. And if that blood is going to the surface, it's letting heat off. If I get cold, the opposite happens. Blood stays more towards the organs in my body. That's why things such as what's it called? Frostbite happens like at your fingertips and your toes, because the blood is staying away from those edges so that it stays warm. So maintaining body temperature. I mentioned blood clotting. Platelets are involved in that. Blood clotting seals damaged blood vessels to prevent blood loss. So your body has a way, if you do get shot or something does happen, your body can try to minimize the blood loss by forming clots. This acid-base homeostasis is very important. Your body is very sensitive to pH, and we'll talk about why that is a little bit later on, but blood helps you maintain that pH, 7.35 to 7.45. And you'll see the numbers sometimes slightly different, but blood is important for stabilizing your blood pressure, which that seems like it makes maybe too much sense, but blood is it plays a huge role. Blood volume plays a huge role in your blood pressure. Blood pressure is not just your blood, it's the pressure that your blood creates against the surfaces of your arteries and different blood vessels. All right, so let's go into plasma. Let's talk more about that. Plasma, 90% water, as you saw in the slide with the diagram on it. It's 90% water. And so if blood is 8% of our body weight, and 55% of that is plasma, and plasma is 90% water, you can start to see why people say, we're primarily made up of water, which makes sense. A lot of these different parts of our bodies contain water. It's a pale yellow liquid, and it determines the viscosity of blood. Like I said, if you drink more water, if you have more water in your body, you have more water in your bloodstream, and then your blood flows faster. It's less viscous. It's not as thick. But if you're dehydrated, the reverse can happen, and your blood flow can be sluggish. All right, plasma proteins form a colloid. Right, a colloid makes up about 9% of the plasma volume. Right, remember the other percentage is primarily water, but you have these proteins. These proteins in your blood plasma. Right, so you have one of the most important ones is called albumin. Large protein synthesized in the liver, and we're going to talk about albumin a lot when we talk about the liver, when we talk about the digestive system and the immune responses, all the different body systems that we're going to talk about in this class. You'll see albumin come up again. That's responsible for blood's colloid osmotic pressure, right? It draws water into blood by osmosis, right? Blood needs water to be able to flow.
You have proteins such as albumin, which help draw water into blood. Remember how osmosis works? If you don't, go back over it. We will talk about osmosis quite a few times, especially in dealing with blood. But a lot of these things transfer into and out of blood by osmosis, right? Changes in concentration, remember, changes in concentrations, higher concentration of substances, lower concentration of substances. Water will flow from the low concentration of substances in the water to the higher concentration of substances in the water to dilute it and cause a balance, right? So if you don't understand, if you forgot osmosis, go back. That's something you want to go back over. Immune proteins, also known as antibodies. These have been in the news a lot with the coronavirus, but these are you'll notice that you'll find these in as far in the plasma proteins, and these are made by leukocytes, which are a component of the immune system. We're going to talk about the immune system. Transport proteins, lipid-based molecules otherwise incompatible with mostly water-based plasma, allows transportation of molecules in blood, right? We'll talk about those. And then we'll also talk about clotting proteins, which stop bleeding from injured blood vessels by forming blood clots while working with platelets. Plasma, the last 1% of plasma consists of several small molecules, mostly dissolved in water, okay? And they can be ready to exchange with the blood and interstitial fluid in most capillary beds, right? So there are a few other molecules in plasma. This is a diagram just talking about some of the components of plasma. Go over that, just know that slide. Cirrhosis, disease, liver disease, right? I'm sure you may have heard of this. Those of you all who may know someone who is unfortunately struggling with alcoholism may have experienced this, experienced cirrhosis. All right, what is cirrhosis? And this is a real life situation. 10th leading cause of death for men, 12th for women. It can be caused by alcoholism, cancer, hepatitis. So it's actually, unfortunately, very common. But it results in a progressive decrease in production of plasma proteins, which leads to decreased colloid osmotic pressure. So plasma proteins, remember we talked about the albumin, results in fluid loss to extracellular spaces, producing severe edema, swollenness in the abdomen. So the proteins, the plasma proteins decreased, so the liver produces the proteins which are useful for the blood. Those proteins are not made at the level they're supposed to be. This causes a decreased colloidal osmotic pressure, which causes fluid to not be drawn into the bloodstream, and therefore just be in your body and in your extracellular space, and just cause swelling.